Wow. Just imagine. I've never tried to talk about this game before. I am preparing to talk about it publicly for the first time next month, March of 2026. My name is Rob Larson, and I live in Superior, Wisconsin. I teach communication and media studies in Duluth, Minnesota. These are the Twin Ports. It's very cold up here for a lot of the year. And then we have beautiful summers. I was born and raised in Wisconsin. I'm from a small town in Midwest Wisconsin, Northwest Wisconsin. And when I was in high school, uh, I collected comic books. And when I was younger than that, I collected baseball cards. I remember there was a strike which made me not want to collect baseball cards anymore in the early 90s. I saw the Minnesota Twins, my baseball team, win the World Series. Uh, Around the time I was becoming interested in baseball as a little kid, around the first time I went to the Metrodome, the Twins won in 1987. And then by the time they won another World Series in 1991, I was a fan. And watching the World Series in 1991 was a very formative childhood experience. It was a fantastic time to be a fan of the Minnesota Twins. So when there was a strike after that, it's kind of a rude awakening. I don't know what it was. It was a combination of knowing that something as magical as America's pastime could be subject to not only the strike. I didn't even really know what that meant. What I know is it shortened the season and it really affected the baseball cards because that's where it was really at for me. When I went to the Metrodome, there was a kiosk where you could have a baseball card made of you. They'd let you put on a Minnesota Twins jersey and a hat, hold a bat, take your picture like a photo booth, and then you got a Tops. It had Tops branding on it, and it looked like you were in a baseball card. And I just was so fascinated with that possibility. It was pretty expensive for a little piece of cardboard. But if I would have known just how much money I would end up spending in my life on little pieces of cardboard, maybe I would have ran from that booth. So I transitioned from collecting, alphabetizing baseball cards by team, by talent. I had a binder full of Nolan Ryans when I was a kid. For some reason, my best friend and I got on this kick of just collecting Nolan Ryan. So it didn't matter if it was a 7-cent Donruss card or his rookie. And we neither of us ever had his rookie, but he shared his rookie, Nolan Ryan. The Nolan Ryan rookie was a dual card. There were two people on one baseball card. Anyway, nobody's gonna. I gotta start over. Should I start over? Hmm. I collected baseball cards because I liked collecting. I alphabetized them and sorted them by team because I liked sorting them. I liked buying the Beckett price guide and and discovering whether or not one of the baseball cards I had was worth a fortune, which they were not. But it was fun and it was nostalgic looking back. A great time. And as I moved away from baseball into middle school and high school, I started reading DC Vertigo comics and becoming very interested in science fiction, watching more movies, renting movies. It was a great time to graduate. I'm class of 1997, so I'm getting pretty old now. But then this phenomenon swept the land in Wisconsin. I remember hearing rumblings about it because this this new kind of collectible card came along in the form of Magic the Gathering, and it was a phenomenon, and the cards were very rare. The first time I ever got a hold of Magic cards myself was the revised edition, and I started collecting those cards, only had a few of them before other editions came out. Fourth edition and some sets, Fallen Empires and Ice Age, and I think I must have collected. I think my heyday for Magic was when Ice Age came out. That was when we actually could get a hold of them. And then this set called Homelands came out, and if the alignment, if the timing had worked out correctly, and I had gotten interested in this just a little bit sooner, and that's what a lot of people say, because the very first cards, the alpha and beta cards, I think the alpha cards premiered in Wisconsin in 1993, and I became interested in Magic as about a junior in high school, which would have been 95. So in that short span of time, I learned about something that I had no idea about, learned how to play it, and started playing Magic with my classmates in the cafeteria before school would start. And you could tell it was a fun game because the people who got in that little clique of dorks, basically, we were religious about it. We were going there. Who gets up early to go to high school? Well, we did. And I wasn't really allowed to go play cards and stuff after school, and I had other commitments, and so there was just this time in the morning in the cafeteria, and it was Pop Tarts and milk in a bag and Magic the Gathering. And between collecting baseball cards and then what happened with Magic, it's something that is definitely, along with comics and movies and Valley Fair and stuff, it's my childhood. And when I got into college, I was driving and interested in a lot of other things, and forgot about Magic, except for a brief resurgence where some people in college and I played for it wasn't more than a year, but it was around the time the Urza's Saga, Urza's Legacy, Urza's Destiny cards were coming out, which to me was like a radically different game compared to uh, fourth edition revised Ice Age. And so I collected cards. I kept all my old baseball cards, all my old Magic cards, and and then when the Urza's block came out and we got into it, I had a little more spending money at that time, and so I just bought cards, and and we had fun playing. It was sort of like a second wind, but it didn't last as long as it did in high school. And again, moved on to other things. And I, you know, got married, went to graduate school. Every now and then I would see that Magic was still making cards. I'd see them in Walmart. I remember buying a half a box of Gate Crash, if anybody knows this set that never really, just every now and then. Mirrodin, I remember just seeing, oh, they still have Magic. Maybe I'll buy some. Maybe I'll get back into it someday. I remember just buying a box or some packs here and there and putting them away. And it wasn't until the pandemonium hit in and this is not just my story. There are people, if they listen to this rambling, it will echo their own stories. People my age who maybe are from a similar region or a similar I don't know, trajectory, then you'll have a similar story. But during the pandemonium, I, like many others, I was digging board games and old DVDs and stuff out of the basement, just looking, taking stock basically in what we had. I found my old Garbage Pail Kids and um, card games I collected that I thought might be popular, like Magic. a lot of them weren't, but I've got these old games like Rage, werewolf game, and Wyvern, Blood Wars, Star Trek. I could name off the top of my head 12 different games that they were selling in my hobby shop in town. Um, and a lot of people bought those games and tried to play them basically because Magic was always out of stock. I have a lot of Jihad cards, Vampire, the Masquerade. I thought that was a good game too, but a little bit more complicated. And as time would reveal, most of those games were duds, very little collectability or value. Of course, I was never really thinking about the value uh, because of the way baseball cards had disappointed me. So I just happened to find a box of my old Magic cards, and when I was rifling through them, a card that I always thought was very ugly, a revised dual land card called Tundra. I never liked the pattern that was in the text box because it would take two different colors because this is a dual land and it was like stripes. And I just thought that's not very appealing. It's not very good design. The art itself was fine and its utility in the game was great. And those cards, when I was collecting them, went from being a few dollars or they had to create a price guide called what was it, Wizard Scry? There are a few different ones, I guess, but um I remember looking at the value of those dual lands going up in the price guides and thinking, why are these ugly cards getting to be more and more valuable? But I remember buying one at a garage sale for like $15 and thinking while I paid my like hard-earned Little Caesars money, like this is a lot to pay for. I could buy a whole starter deck and a couple of boosters for that. But I bought it because I was building a deck that was white and what, blue, white and blue. I think that's it. Tundra. Yeah. Anyway, I found that card recently, about 3 years ago, 2 years ago. Well, it's only been 2 years that I found that card. It was on the tail end of the pandemonium. Maybe it was 3 years ago. And I learned that times have changed since the old price guides. I found those too. I found old, all kinds of fun old stuff. And I learned from going to YouTube and just doing a little online research that there was this website called TCG Player and that you could get an app on your phone and just like going and scanning barcodes at Walmart for groceries, you could hold your phone camera over a card and it'd go beep and let you know what the card was worth. And so I was trying that with a few cards and I got to my Tundra and I went beep. And instead of it going beep, it made just dopamine releasing chimes of like, you really got something here. And the card was worth like $400 or something, like a lot more than 15. I thought, wow, that's like what we always hoped baseball cards would do, that we would put them away in a shoebox and dig them out later when we were adults and we'd have Mickey Mantle rookies and Honus Wagners. And of course, this was no Honus Wagner, but and then I watched a documentary about the Black Lotus, about the rise in value of the Black Lotus. It was a very well done documentary. It made me interested all over again in a topic that's always been fascinating to me, which is why do we collect? Why are we all archivists? If you ask people in conversation if they have a collection of something, nearly everybody does. It doesn't matter if it's fishing lures or figurines or beanie babies or photographs. We're all collectors and archivists of something, and with very few exceptions, when I ask college students in classes what they collect, not only do people have something that they can tell us they collect, but they have many anecdotes and exciting stories about why they're passionate about collecting that thing. I think this leads to some deeper issue related to humanity and our connection to art and creativity and logic and the time-space continuum. And I'm not going to bore you with a lot of philosophy right now. It's not why I'm trying to talk about this stuff at all. Um, but it just sort of was the right time in history and the circumstances with our, you know, not the usual availability to go out and do stuff that we were accustomed to doing in our adult lives and with our own kids. So there were a lot of people going to their basements and not just finding stuff that they had that had been sitting dormant, but also not being able to find things that they wish they could have found down there in the basement. And that was the case for me too. For the cards that I found, there were cards that I couldn't find that must have gotten lost somewhere along the way in some abandoned storage unit or didn't make it from one move to another. And so when I started looking at how to find cards that gave me nostalgic vibes, I realized that there's this huge market, a collector's market, and that there are people who have backgrounds in finances and who know about economics and the way supply and demand and scarcity and stuff work and how value can be derived from that. And I realized that a lot of these kids that played cards like I did had grown up, and some of them never stopped taking the industry seriously, including Hasbro, Wizards of the Coast becoming a major tentpole in a worldwide toy company. And as I dug into it more and read more, I realized that not only was Wizards of the Coast a big part, a big subsidiary of Hasbro, but one of their main sources of income to this day. I started to study the card market. I've never been a fan of Pokemon, but I have children now, and one of them is. And so I realized that there are many, many adults and children buying these cards, using a lot of discretionary income on them, and enjoying the community that comes with collecting, playing, trading, and the online extension of that, all the influencers and people who are talking about the industry and treating it like it's a like it's the stock market or something. And so there's joys and dangers associated with this, but what became very clear to me was that um, I think most adults, I would be willing to say, overwhelming majority of adults, put their kids' stuff away and, maybe they'll have an episode of nostalgia here and there, but they're, doing adult things, fixing their house, trying to buy a boat. I don't know what's adult. But I realized that a lot of adults continue in this hobby. And for some reason, that's very exciting to me, very encouraging, not depressing, not a waste, but exciting. And it took me a while to just get used to that, to just sit with that and go, yeah, I like this stuff too. And I have a little more money than I did when I was a kid. You can probably see the gears turning right now. But what I had been spending about 7 years, if I'm being honest, doing prior to digging my old cards out of my basement, was writing a science fiction novel. I'd done a lot of academic writing through graduate school and as part of my teaching position. And I wanted to take a break from all that dry academic writing and this amazing work I did at philosophy school. I just wanted to write something fun like I did when I was a kid. And I set out to write my sci-fi epic American novel. And I spent a lot of time on that um, before, during, and after the pandemic. And I had such a amazing time writing that book. And so I learned also about the state of the publishing industry after writing that book, about how difficult it is to publish a book, how seeking a traditional literary agent and a book editor and a publishing label was opening yourself up to a lot of query and rejection cycles, and that it can be very disheartening. And frankly, it's such a uh, saturated market out there, and there aren't a lot of traditional publishing houses left with editors and if you really just break down the economics of the publishing model and the amount of investment a house has to make in a particular author, you realize that those seats are incredibly coveted and that they're oftentimes looking to fill a very particular niche in their schedule, their plans of what they're planning to publish that year. And so rather than be disheartened by all of that, I felt this strange sense of urgency to get the book, even if nobody was going to buy it. I wanted to make that book available just for the copyright, just for the ISBN number. And being in academia, I had a lot of my friends and colleagues tell me, don't, whatever you do, don't self-publish. Don't don't publish it yourself. That's like, might as well shoot yourself in the foot. If you want anybody to see this, if you ever have any hope to get a traditional publisher in your life, don't self-publish it. And so of course I didn't listen to anybody and I put it out there and I just felt accomplished that I spent this time writing this book, revising, editing, imagining and going through this creative process. It wasn't academic. And around the time I finished it and made it available in ebook and print form and all this stuff, seeing that it didn't immediately set the world on fire and Netflix did not want to develop my novel into season one of a great sci-fi episodic series. Wasn't going to be the next Stranger Things right away. You know, I didn't worry too much about that. The science fiction book that I wrote was almost 400 pages, which also, by word count, you would think high word count must mean commitment to your idea, right? Not necessarily. I realized that just to buy a copy of the book was going to cost a lot just based on how many pages it was to print it. And so I had this a wild idea to divide my science fiction novel into three shorter books, book one, book two, book three. And while I was doing that, I had a conversation with a friend of mine who said, whatever you do, don't take your whole book and divide it into smaller books. Not a good idea. That's very specific advice. I didn't listen. And I published three short, chunks of my book as three separate books. And I had a bright idea to make a poster upon the release of the third of the three books. I remember sitting down with this software called Canva, which a lot of people know about. And they had just created a feature. Now, this is 2023. ancient history. But Canva had added a little AI component, AI image generator. And this is probably around the time Will Smith was eating the spaghetti. You know, we see those videos. But I'm talking early when he looks like claymation, and we're just learning about how you can actually type words into a prompt and a computer will create an image for you. And the images were, let's say, rudimentary compared to what they are now. Um, we're in 2026 now, where it is barely discernible what is AI generated and what isn't, which of course thematically is right in line with what I'd spent the 7 years writing the sci-fi novel about, and always being interested in cryptocurrency and childhood anecdotes and everything that I'm rambling on about now. I started generating images of Ramona Blue, who's the protagonist for my sci-fi novel, because I wanted some images of her on the poster that I was designing. This was before I ever heard of people talking about the terrors of data centers being built and environmental and ecological damage being created by big tech. There was not any sense of what was ideologically correct or incorrect and how that tied to politics, let's say. So I didn't know what I was getting into. I just thought it was neat to be able to say, I want an image of blah, 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 type it in and have um, and have images come back. It's also around the time I learned that I have this condition called aphantasia, which sounds like a made up word. It is a, which is the negation in the Latin of fantasia, which is the mind's eye. Aphantasia means you don't have one of those. You are not able to conjure visual images either through recall or through imagination. You close your eyes. Some people don't even have to close their eyes, but you close your eyes, you think of a pink elephant, and apparently the overwhelming majority of the population of humanity can conjure images in their mind's eye, in their fantasia. They can close their eyes and boom, there it is. Which, for a person who has never had that and never knew that that imagination works, it sounds like an exaggeration to people like me, this 3 or 4% of the population that does not have this amazing technology built into their visual cortex or whatever. I'm learning about it. But when I first started reading about people who, I've always heard the expression vivid imagination, and I've always just thought that a lot of people exaggerate about the how vibrant and visual their imagination really is. It never occurred to me that my mind didn't work like everybody else's and that I was missing something pretty profound. And as I learned about that, it coincided with this AI text to visuals technology that's very new in all the world, in all of history. And so the enthusiasm I had for text to visual AI is not only because I think it's neat and it's cool, and I grew up with computers and computers are doing wild new things, but I also realized that it is getting at this maybe could be perceived as a deficiency or a disability even. I mean, I don't feel too depressed about it. I still in the back of my mind think that other people are exaggerating or over stating the power of their imagination. But frankly, and this is true, if I were to close my eyes and think of a pink elephant, and if I could see one show up, that would be, in my mind, hallucinating. Like something is awry. But for many other people, that's just totally ordinary, just part of the human condition. But imagine that if you've been used to that, and I have read about people who once had a very visual imagination, um, go through a medical procedure or some kind of trauma and lose the ability to do that. I imagine if you had it and you lost it, it would be something um, that could be as disconcerting as having vision and losing it, you know? So to realize that I have mind's eye impairment or blindness, it's something that I could have made it a whole lifetime through and not even realized. And maybe as we know more about this, uh, maybe I'll get some of my other people are exaggerating. Maybe I'll get some of that back because I still find it hard to believe that people have like an IMAX of visuals when they close their eyes. And if you do have this, I mean, apparently you're the resounding majority of the population. But if you're one of the 3 or 4% who's listening to me right now and is going, no, I'm like you. I don't see anything when I close my eyes. You know, I hate to rain on your parade, but you should look up aphantasia. It's very fascinating. Anyway, maybe that's why I was so excited about this text to visual conversion thing. I've always been interested in filmmaking and writing and imagining. It's just that my imagination doesn't, when I read a book, I'm not conjuring anything. I'm analyzing. It's like it's more like a math or something. And I don't want to get into the weeds too far on this stuff, but I'm trying to justify why I wanted to spend 7 years working on a sci-fi novel about AI, about androids who don't know they're androids, who find out they are, and through their coming of age romance, um, because they were built to be unassuming teenagers living in a park in northwest Wisconsin, and they discover that they are not human, but they've been created by a government program, and it's an epic sci-fi tale. Well, the protagonist, Ramona Blue, is a character who is very near and dear to my heart. I've spent a lot of time thinking about her and bringing her to life. And so when I could see her in some ways for the very first time, and instead of hiring an artist or a graphic designer to show me what she looks like, or relying on my own lack of a mind's eye to show me what she looks like, I learned what she looks like through AI generation, which, from my perspective, is fitting. There's an irony to it. I wouldn't have taken a single AI generated sentence and put it in my fiction, in my writing. I would not use AI to create even a phrase that I couldn't take credit for. But as soon as that book was finished and available as an ebook and in print forms, and the copyright stamps on there, and that's the end of an era, it's like this other door opened, AI generation. And I can see why people will be anti AI when it comes to art or design, that it's taking other people's specialized training and education and expertise and, um, you know, flying in the face of all of that. I understand it. Just like there are people out there who will write AI generated books and write them, generate them, and sell them on the market. And maybe some of those are more sold than my, you know, purely human written book about AI. You know, some things don't seem fair. But when it came to, I've commissioned artwork before, and it's cost prohibitive. And so when I started generating the artwork for Ramona Blue for the poster for the third book of my sci-fi trilogy, which is actually just one big book, something really cool happened. I kept hitting the button and generating more and more images of her, and some of them were terrible, and I'd get rid of them. Every now and then there'd be a good one, I'd keep it. And so my quest to just find an image of this protagonist for this bit of marketing that I was doing with the Canva website, I kept collecting these little thumbnails. They almost look like postage stamps of her in many different ways. I changed my text, hit generate, and four more images would pop up. And some of them would they'd censor themselves, not let me look at them. Some of them would be amazing. Some of them would have seven fingers. Some of them would be, glitched out. And I would play around with that and I would look forward to having some free time to spend with Canva. And the technology was so new that they hadn't figured out a way to monetize it or limit it yet. It was just this feature that was almost being beta tested within the Canva website. And so I just collected a folder full of images of Ramona Blue. And so instead, when the poster was finally finished, it wasn't one image of her. It was square panels. It almost looked like a collage. And I had so much fun making it. It was just great to have that interaction with an entity that was building a piece of lore or some, marketing material or something visual for a person who has no real visual imagination. There's something so satisfying about it, about the curating process. And it is about that time that I realized that a bunch of my interests in that moment were going to converge. I was never a big fan of playing Magic the Gathering. I loved collecting it. And I did play in a few tournaments when I was a kid. I remember there was a pizza place in my town called Kids Corner Pizza, and they would have a monthly Magic the Gathering tournament. You could go there, get a couple slices of pizza and a soda, and play some games of Magic. And if you won, you'd get a few packs and free pizza. And that was probably the height of my enjoyment of the game, along with some games in college and high school, but I was never competitive. And as the game got more complicated, they released more cards and more, Boolean spells, or, it started out with things like banding and trample. And then it graduated to a whole host of other logical, you know, instructions on the cards. And as it got more complicated, and as I started to see things just reprinted, and as it became more of like say, a cash grab, I I didn't have the patience to continue to play it. And that is also because there's this little game called Texas Hold'em that came along in the early 2000s. I mean, it's always been, but it had this stratospheric rise in popularity, and a lot of people were playing it. And when I was really into it in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, it got banned, but for a while people were playing it online. You could basically just throw down a credit or debit card and buy in at these tables and play online Texas Hold'em. And I didn't like that as much. I could see why I would get banned, but I would play these table games when I was in college. I was in college for a long time. And I remember a weekly game that it was pretty cheap, um, next to a sub shop, so I could go there, get a sub, play some Texas Hold'em with this house full of guys, and those were great times. And Texas Hold'em is just, as soon as I started playing it and reading about it, learning about it, became my favorite game, my favorite card game, way better than any of the card games I collected in high school, and infinitely playable. household recognition as a game. Everybody knows poker. And, I start to think about all the different paths that led to this moment, this podcast, this discussion, this public confession. It's not any one thing. It's not just Magic the Gathering. It's not just Texas Hold'em. It's not just interest in design or in sci-fi or in philosophy. It's so many things. It's the books about magic tricks that I rented out of the public library when I was a kid, when I first learned to do sleight of hand with a deck of cards. The riffle shuffle. It's watching people deal blackjack, learning what the word croupier meant. I hope I pronounced that right. I'm gonna go ahead to pick up my kids pretty soon, so I'll have to cut this short, save it for another episode. All of this, I didn't say a single thing about what I set out here to do. Maybe when you start to make your public confession, you've got to preface it. And so all of this, let's say, is a preface for what is about to hit the streets. Um, I made a card game. I took all the things that I liked all around the same time and created a super hobby that enabled me to do the things that were maybe giving me the dopamine that I needed at that time. I wanted to get away from doom scrolling. I wanted to get away from listening to people argue about everything, about money, about disease, about politics. I wanted to not have a midlife crisis and max out all my credit cards buying my childhood card game that would have broken my wallet. I wanted to do something constructive. And so, long story short, I've created a card game. It's in its, I wouldn't say it's in its infancy because I've invested a lot of time and a lot of money, and some of that money isn't mine. I feel responsibility to do this as well as I can, knowing it's going to be an uphill climb. If there's anything that would be harder to market than a card game, or than a novel, which I've already tried and failed at. It's a card game. I mean, this you can count on one hand how many successful collectible card games there are. Magic, Pokemon, and you tell me. Most of them, um, in the margins, unmentioned. And this may be another one, but my interest in cryptocurrency and in semiotics, which is my field, let's say, um, everything I've just mentioned in this rambling, it all has led me to this next failure. Only, the self-deprecating stuff has got to stop. I am proud of this AI generated slop that is about to hit the market. Now I got a great idea for a card game. I can't wait to share it with you and tell you all about it. I think it's going to be good, but I've got a long and sturdy track record of trying and succeeding in accomplishing my personal goals, none of which have been lucrative. And that's definitely not the impetus behind this next uh, episode. But I got something here I'm going to share to be continued.